What can you learn from character design? Often when depicting the essence of storytelling, most refer to the narrative or world building at large, listing character dynamics, plot-driven motives, environments, or plot twists as elements that drive and progress a story forward. Character design is more often overlooked, despite being the undervalued treasure towards finessing the potential of storytelling, as readers can learn so much from the visual introduction of its main character alone, what time period it takes place, the geography of its setting, which genre, even to the characteristics from race, gender, quirks, habits, class, age, height, weight, fashion, or even personality. With a single usage of good character design, so many descriptives can be shown and not told. Giving history to a character adds authenticity and a response more engaging towards the story's premise. Which leads me to the second question: what does make good character design? The answer can be variable depending on the purpose. Is the design more focused towards function or style, or perhaps a crossbreed of both? Functionality focuses on the construction of attire or appearance solely for practicality, not aesthetics. For instance, in Radiation House, the main character works as a radiology technician. His attire isn't striking nor desirable in the eyes of memorability or markability, but represents the realism of what is an accustomed qualified doctor's uniform. What he wears does its purpose. Blue scrubs allow for easier visibility towards different shades of red, vital towards the identification of blood consistencies, as well as a pager to keep informed of any medical emergencies. Perhaps a bland character design, but anything else would have taken you out of the story, made a professional career appear more carefree, and lack the gravity towards his life or death decision making that reflects the occupation in real life. This is thoroughly comparable to designs made solely for commercial profitability. Dolls, toys, mascots, or even VTuber models are all created with aesthetic in mind. Japan thrives within this department. Countless packaging designs in Japan are surrounded by adorable characters, the appeal of cuteness and youth attracting the many and forking in a significant amount of revenue. And similar approaches are often found in anime. Characters with wildly coloured hair that can defy gravity, to outfits that wouldn't make sense in reality or are downright impractical. But it's these decisions that allow for distinctive art, exaggerations that pursue individuality and can be easily identifiable through silhouette alone. Studio Trigger are a perfect example of those who create stylized character design, with Sushio's work on Kill la Kill, Shigeto Koyama on Promare, as well as Yaya Shinari co-designing Little Witch Academia's designs, and working on the latest Trigger project, Cyberpunk Edgerunners. There's an abundance of charisma in each project, and Trigger are by no means shy towards capitalising off these characters within an affluence of figurines and merchandise. It's coincidental then that Studio Trigger would soon be working towards the very manga I will be discussing in this video, that prospers in its character designs too. Having already worked on a successfully adapted commercial in the past, it makes sense that Trigger would collaborate and work to adapt such an eccentric manga befitting their brand. This manga, of course, being Dungeon Meshi. As a disclaimer for the video, I'll try as much as possible to stay spoiler free, but given the nature of the topic, it may be difficult to stray from minor spoilers, but any heavy plot spoilers will be kept to a very minimum as much as is feasible. But to briefly summarise, Dungeon Meshi is a fantasy seinen manga written by Ryoko Kui, in which a group of explorers and adventurers travel the depths of a dungeon filled with creatures and monsters. They battle for survival every day to find and save the main character's sister, who was eaten by a dragon. The group mentioned consists of a human named Laius, a dwarf named Senshi, a half-foot named Chilchuk, and an elf named Marcel, all of whom consume a creature every chapter in order to conquer the dungeon without falling to the grips of starvation. Following the likeliness of the classical Dungeons & Dragons and other similar fantasy RPG games, the manga is a perfect blend of dungeon crawling and monster cuisine exploration. And fantasy as a genre has the opportunity to experiment with character design subsequent to its fictional classification. Narratives, environments, creatures, and more can be derivative of reality. There's a freedom towards the essence of world building, in that it's not constrained to actuality, and with this is an opportunity towards experimentation and immeasurable possibilities. Recognising the games Ryoko Kui plays, it's easy to see what continues to inspire her. Games like Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous and its indirect sequel Pathfinder Kingmaker are both fantasy RPG games that, most noticeably, include character customization. On top of her interest in Super Donkey Kong, there's a clear distinction towards liking games that explore character design, not just subjected to humans, but creatures and other fantasy races. As a result, Dungeon Meshi enriches itself with a plethora of characters not just limited to Caucasian humans, but a variable list of characters making for a diverse collective. And yet, the main cast of Dungeon Meshi aren't that specular in their visuals. Instead, Ryoko Kui excels in versatility that enables her world building to be integrated within her character designs. There may be no crazy anime hair or a luxurious 6-foot-long sword, but intricacies that allow you to learn about Dungeon Meshi's world and hidden depths. Methodically chosen with attributes in mind, Dungeon Meshi's characters have structure and purpose reflective of the fantasy world and a character's individuality. Ryoko Kui's character designs are identifiable, even if she prioritises function over style, and the reason for that is through comparing her characters to another repetitively. By incorporating a diverse set of characters, having them look similar would reflect too much uniformity. And so, Ryoko Kui experiments around with fashion, race, or abstract styling to review if the character's defining traits still shine through, even when altered slightly. This method also distinctly proves physical variation and the ways appearances matter in Dungeon Meshi's world, as specific traits are more identifiable for certain races. As for fashion, Ryoko Kui noted, when you design characters, ideally you should be able to tell them apart, even if they switch clothing. As, from a reader's point of view, knowing and understanding a character's personality should dictate how you perceive what they'd wear. From our perspective, we know a character like Laius would never wear something as loose and unprotected as Marcel's outfit, because Ryoko Kui gives defining traits to her cast that are reflective of how they tackle dungeon exploring, as well as how their own history and appearances change their fashion choices. For example, Laius' top body armour is bulky and sturdy for protection against heavy-hitting creatures, but he chose arm coverings in mind that allows for flexibility to hold weapons, as he's the main fighter of the group, which also explains the chainmail skirt, lightweight trousers and armoured knee pads combo choice, as he would want less restrictive movement. More significantly, Laius chose a strong armoured neckpiece with an uncommon mouth lip for specific reasons. 1. Because it allows his lips to be seen when talking, beneficial for smaller races who may have struggled to see otherwise. 2. It allows him to eat much easier, of which is Laius' biggest priority. 3. It allows him to store stuff in there, in true Laius style. And 4. Is protection against dungeon rabbits, which Laius learns are rumoured to kill dungeon explorers horribly and viciously. In fairness to Laius, his precautions earn merit, as their resulting collision with the rabbits does in fact save Marcel's life. In addition, Laius does have a lighter fit underneath with a covering of chainmail, but from his previous experiences with dungeons, has learnt that a lighter main covering was far too weak against the more powerful creatures seen further in the dungeons. It's also interesting to note his appearance may have differed from the offset had he convinced the others to downgrade his uniform for trade, showcasing the effects monetary value holds for survival. Significantly contrasting, Chilchuk's design has to adapt to the reality that he's a half-foot, a race much more nimble and smaller in height. Already carrying his big rucksack of supplies, heavy armour would become a drawback, so he wears a thicker vest instead. Chilchuk likes being light on his feet. He's not a fighter and so doesn't carry heavy weaponry, and chooses to wear leather boots that are sturdy for sufficient travelling, but lightweight enough to run away from enemies and not trigger floor traps. Wearing cutaway gloves is crucial to his role of enabling traps, and also more effective as a bow and arrow user, which he obtains far later in the series. It also gives him more shielding from the cold, which he feels far greater being a half-foot. Similar to his scarf, which, albeit, is worthless as protective wear, but a gift from his daughter and holds sentimental value. Height-wise, Senshi isn't much taller than Chilchuk too. Being a dwarf, however, he has a bulkier physicality and a build that exerts energy faster, as showcased when Laius transforms into a dwarf form and rapidly becomes exhausted. As of this, his outfit is the most exposed, not wanting more weight to carry him down, but having enough armour to at least protect vital organs. Being the protector of the group, both objectively within fights and then his cooking parental role as the feeder of 3, Senshi uses his pot as a makeshift shield and cookware equipment. Being small but as strong as he is, Senshi carries this pot, which we later learn is a family heirloom, because it conveniently protects his backside as well. However, unlike the other members of the group, being a dwarf, Senshi is more sensitive to teleportation sickness. His ears, in particular the semicircular canals, are very sensitive, giving him more reason to wear a helmet. And yet, much like the others previously mentioned, he chose a specific clothing piece as context to his past. The helmet is actually a memento to his friend who died in battle, the scar working as a reminder to the horrors evoked by hippogriffs, of which Senshi tried to mend so as to wear himself. Leading to the last character of the group. Of all 4 characters, Marcille's design is the most fashionable. All the others work for functionality, but Marcille and her elvish background make for a design that offers style a little bit more. In saying that, Marcille's outfit is still designed with travelling needs in mind. Being a magical user, it's rare she finds herself in close combat, hence the lack of thick armour. Instead, Marcille favours mobility and accessibility, needing lighter clothing to enact spells with big motions, not wanting to be restricted in her manoeuvres and to have easy access to her magical book and items at all times, even going to the lengths of sewing her sleeve shut so as they don't get caught. At first I wondered why she kept such long hair, being cautious of creatures finding the opportunity to grab and pull it. But Marcille makes a point that hair is a useful tool to magic users in Dungeon Meshi's world, as it can be applied to magical spells. Though the constant hairstyle change is more a part of Marcille wanting to maintain a certain appearance, no doubt an elven characteristic. However, spoiler warning, Ryoko Kui made a subtle character design decision in drawing Marcille's ears quite rounded for an elf, especially when compared to other elves shown further in the series, which would later make sense as it's revealed she is in fact a half-elf. All of the main cast have reasons for their outfits of choice, and Ryoko Kui does a splendid job of making them feel realistically applied and practiced. They're not experimental in colour palette or fashionable style, but guided in the reality of dungeon exploration. They delve into the elements of world building, pieces of clothing that are provided context the further you read into the manga. To get to the stage of final character designs, any artist should start with the basics, being sketchwork. No matter how incomplete or loose, or even intangible, practice is key for character design. And within Ryoko Kui's artbook series Daydream Hour, there's plenty of examples of her sketchwork. From thumbnails, rough doodles to potential concepts, the practicality of idea generation is vital to the emergence of improving your designs. Producing sketches daily is an effective way of noticing patterns, seeing if your designs are too reliant on certain form or body shapes, understanding where you need to improve or work upon, and as seen with one of Kui's notes, I realised that I unconsciously tended to keep drawing the same body types, so I tried to draw something that was different from my usual. In a story like Dungeon Meshi, though I'd argue body diversity is something any story should aim for, where certain races naturally have different builds, bodies, height and weight, etc., experimenting with sketches outside of her accustomed body shape form no doubt improved her work tremendously. Even doing real-life studies, examining the outside world and picking for realistic references is effective practice, of which can be seen in her many portraits and body studies. But gesture and distinctive silhouettes are what can push a design further and refine individuality. To quote artist Michael Hampton from Figure Drawing Design and Invention, gesture can be the way we recognise moods through body mechanics, the innate ability to recognise your best friend from 20 to 30 feet away. And a character revealed later in the series named Izutsumi is a perfect example of Kui exploring expression and gesture drawing. Being a feline beastman, characteristics like cat ears and a furry tail are exemplary assets that are easily distinguishable for storyboard pieces, where sketches are drawn fast and without detailing. For any artist under intense deadlines, even the decision to make one asset of a character distinctive could save plentiful hours during rough sketches. And a lot of this distinctiveness is on account of Ryoko Kui drawing more than the conventional. Despite the critical beauty standards as set within Japan, many of the characters in Dungeon Meshi don't fit any alluring criterias, perhaps with the exception of Marcille, although in context, that makes sense given her elven background, a race more affluent to beauty. Many other stories have delved into the criticism of said standards, Helter Skelter a perfectly strident approach, for example. And some manga have explored more inclusion within racial or body diversity or more. Even outside of Japan, manga from other countries have explored the elements of diversity by design. However, initially attempting to experiment with character design, in particular trying to become accustomed to drawing other races, can be a challenge for some, when guidelines at school, or painfully enough, still some paid artistic classes, give facial guidelines to memorise, is predominantly always following white Eurocentric rules and proportions. Yes, proportion-wise it's the most general rule following, but as a result, some artists get stuck within this homogeneity that lacks diversity. And it's for this reason Dungeon Meshi shines due to this break in uniformity. Ryoko Kui will draw character profile after profile to make sure features are different amongst everyone, or that genetic appearances are common within a race. And this practice is what solidifies her world building, makes its people and creatures feel well realised and tangible, research clearly having played a massive component towards factoring in a character's basic appearance, as according to the geography of Dungeon Meshi's societies. But still speaking of perspective, Ryoko Kui is also attentive towards the application of height and weight perspectives. Given the variety of races and their differing average heights and weights, it's only natural to see certain occurrences within the story play out that enhance the principles of exploring a variation of race in fantasy. Chilchuk and Senshi in particular are the shorter races in the main group, and this height distinction against humans and elves is noted throughout the series. A favourite sketch of mine from Ryoko Kui is her study of perspective from the lives of those shorter than their peers. As seen in this sketch, she draws from Chilchuk's perspective, how he looks up to Laius, where his average eye line measures up. It's an inessential sketch as perceived in the manga itself, but an effective way for Ryoko Kui to reference and double-check her character models throughout. The knowledge of height is important regarding dungeon exploring. As noted before, Chilchuk's not a fighter of the group, and doesn't obtain the advantage of height to anticipate potential hidden attacks. This sketch is not only a fun visual, but adds context to storytelling. A common trope, not just limited to manga, is female characters excluded from any appearance other than slim, youthful, feminine, and beautified. In comparison, male characters within the same series are diversified, exhibiting scarring, signs of age, grey hairs, and all kinds of body shapes. It's an ingrained culture of general practice that disallows women showing ugly attributes as decided by society, and that is certainly not the case in Dungeon Meshi. There are several women in the series who are stocky, fat, or just big in general, and they're not drawn within an objectified perspective, or there to be ridiculed or seen as grotesque, but just shown in a natural light, because many women do look like them in real life. It's authentic to the lives they lead. Namari, much like Senshi, is smaller in height, but complete with impressive biceps that allows her to carry heavy weaponry. Tade is not too dissimilar, with the exception of thicker thighs and hips, helped by her taller frame, as is common with ogres. Orcs are another example, a big race by nature who show no hesitancy in showing their bodies, whether women or men. They're incredibly strong whilst carrying stored fat around the stomach, again something so normally non-recurring for women, and dominate any spaces they appear. They're not drawn to be conventionally attractive, although attraction is subjective, but ultimately as regular folk just trying to survive and feed their family. Fat phobia doesn't take place within Dungeon Meshi's story. In fact, the idealism of increased mass, whether fat or increased muscle, has its pros in dungeon crawling, in that having a higher BMI will result in lower chances of starvation and improved energy preservation, as opposed to smaller races or those on the thinner side. For instance, Laius has a stockier muscular appearance, as opposed to a leaner look, more than likely due to his protein-heavy diet. Carrying heavy weaponry, armour and equipment whilst travelling no doubt burns calories fast, whilst building muscle simultaneously, and so a meatier palate is something he aims for, on top of other reasons. Moreover, the idealisms of height and weight aren't the only considerations within character design. Gender presentation is explored in many ways throughout the story too. Izutsumi's uncaring nature towards revealing her body due to being cursed as a beastman. The androgynous approach of the elves' designs, of which is commonly so with elves in the fantasy genre, although Ryoko Kui does show an attentiveness when proposing their designs. The Canary Squad uniform is pretty unisex with a flair of femininity, making sense given the elven community's non-discriminative views towards the softer features of all genders within the race. Given the quote-unquote conventionally attractive characters within Dungeon Meshi, it's actually a breath of fresh air to see the fanservice and conveniently posed scenes given to Senshi, a character whose appearance, being a larger, short man, is never highlighted within a sex appeal nature in manga. Sure, it's used as a joke sometimes, but it's nice seeing Senshi given the sexy shots of appreciation, instead of a racy Marcel moment that would have felt both out of character and misplaced. Instead, Kui appreciates all body types. Ryoko Kui explores world building so succinctly within her designs that writing this script was genuinely challenging. A lot of attributes taken from the character designs alone have varying connections to the plot, some of which were so integral I didn't mention them at all. Having it be a challenge to not reveal spoilers through discussing character design alone detrimentally showcases its unification towards world building and storytelling. In fact, if not for the designs of every creature and character, the plot simply wouldn't have moved forward. Each chapter is given a new design to dissect. Animals, creatures, and monsters analysed by design as Laius and Senshi work out the best way to eat them and continue on their journey. Even more so for the incredibly plot-heavy decisions much later in the series. Dungeon Meshi is a special series for me. It's incredibly charming, includes one of the most entertainingly stupid casts, and has brilliant pacing with engaging storytelling to boot. Me talking about the character design feels like a slither of what I could discuss as a whole, and yet it's always been this area of Ryoko Kui's work that I've been desperate to discuss. It feels so grounded and real, despite being a fantasy manga, and contains some of the biggest examples of diversity I've seen in manga. And it all makes sense. During the manga, there's a sequence in which Marcel reads a book containing a character whose race is like her own, and Marcel, being a half-elf, is a pretty sparse occurrence. Evidently, Marcel is over the moon witnessing a character resembling her race, seeing herself reflected in such a way that's normally a rarity. It's not so coincidental then, in my eyes, that Ryoko Kui's manga is filled with such diversity. Between her sketches and drawings, it's evident she values all shapes of life, and wanted to reflect that further in her story. And it's because of this decision that there will be readers who, just like Marcel, are able to finally see themselves reflected in a manga.
Hey guys, as always, thank you so much for watching my video. I hope that you guys were able to learn a little something from this video. I tried to replicate that kind of educational feel that my Witch Hat Atelier video had. Character design is something that I absolutely love. Dungeon Meshi is something that I absolutely love, so I felt it was only natural for me to combine the two subjects and make a video like this. In saying that, if you do like my content and would like to support me in a different way, just a reminder that I do have a Patreon. If you'd like to join that, I'll put my Patreon link down below. And as always, thank you to my patrons who helped support this channel and this video specifically, because I had to buy all of the manga digitally, which was not cheap, but it was worth it because it's Dungeon Meshi, so I don't really mind. Anyways, I'm rambling on. Thank you for watching, and I hope you guys stick for the next video, which is actually on a manga that a lot of you guys have been requesting. It may not be the video that you technically want, but I'm hoping it's a video that will bring up a pretty interesting topic, so I'll catch you guys in the next one.